welcome back to my channel. My name is Rebecca Carpenter and I am a UK and destination wedding and elopement photographer. And in this video, I'm going to go through my top tips for shooting your very first wedding. Now this video, I am so excited to talk about because shooting your first wedding is such an exciting, nervous, crazy experience which no one can really prepare you for. But in this video, I really hope I can give you some tips and tricks which will help you, which will prepare you and tell you a few things you can expect so you can go through the day with as much preparation as possible. And these are the sorts of things I have learned over the years and I wish someone taught me when I first started. My first tip is know your camera settings. It sounds really simple, but make sure you know how to shoot manual, you know the exposure triangle, you know how it works with aperture, you know ISO, you know your shutter speed, you know those things. They're very basics because a wedding day is just so many challenges with light. You're going indoor, you're going outdoor, you've got dance floor, you've got tungsten lighting, you've got backlit, front lit. It will really challenge you. So what I recommend is practice as much as you can before you shoot your first wedding, because you're going to be thrown in some scenarios which will really throw you and test you as a photographer. So making sure you know your settings straight off the bat. My next tip is make sure you have a pre-consultation call with the couple before the wedding. This is so important that you have this call before your wedding. I tend to have this a month before the day because by then lots of things are set in stone, the timeline, their plans, and this is where you take notes. So make sure you take notes on this call. This is really important. Don't just say, yeah, You want to take notes of what they're saying because that way no wires are crossed, you know exactly what they want, you know their expectations, you can also prepare them as well so you know photographically how long these things take and you know exactly what is happening on the day. On the call, I also give advice for timelines, how long things take. You need to realistically think about how long are things going to take you. It is your first wedding, so always overestimate, but be realistic because wedding timelines do go out of the window on a wedding day. The things on the timeline which are non-negotiable, the ceremony and food, those times are pretty much set in stone and they can't move. Things will overrun because that's what happens on a wedding day. But those two times, you have to live by the clock. You have to be ready. And it's also maybe giving the couple a nudge, giving the bride a nudge, especially in bridal prep, that does run over typically. So just being prepared. So on the call, you want to discuss the timing. So what time is the ceremony? How long do you need to be there before the bridal prep? For me personally, I'm at bridal prep 2 hours, 2 hours and a half before the wedding ceremony, so I'm there in plenty of time. On the call, you want to fill them with much confidence as possible, but also be realistic and honest with your skill set. Because this is your first wedding, there are things which you will not be experienced with, so be really honest with your couple and say, look, this is my first wedding, and naturally, because it is your first wedding, you are going to charge them less. But don't lie, don't kind of deceive them, be really honest with your skill set and your experience and explain that to them and say, this is my first wedding, I am so excited, but if I have as much notice about things as possible, that would be great. For example, the cake cutting, first dance, group shots, you are going to need timings for this, a heads up, so you're not somewhere else where you should be, if that makes sense. On the call, discuss with them what's important to them, what are the VIP shots. So for me, that's the very important photos. Every couple has photos that mean something to them. Some couples might be, our group shots are really important. Some couples might say, I really want a killer confetti photo. Couple portraits really important to us, photos of my grandparents. Every couple is different, so make sure you ask them because you can't promise the world. You're not going to be able to capture everything because that's not possible. It's your first wedding, so give yourself some grace, but ask them what is their priority. So that way you are really looking out for that. So make sure you ask those questions. The next tip, prepare as much as possible. So with your kit, you want to make sure you pack every single eventuality because stuff breaks, stuff lets you down, you just never know. So The most important thing is making sure you have 2 camera bodies. This is vital. I would never shoot a wedding without 2 camera bodies. My very first wedding, I couldn't afford a second body, so I borrowed a second body from a friend. Shout out to Noel. So if you can't afford a second camera, borrow one, hire one, look on eBay, get a super cheap one. Make sure you have a second body. In case the first body breaks down, not having photos, not be able to take photos isn't an option. That shows a complete lack of professionalism. So make sure you are prepared as much as possible. Lenses are so important. For me, if you were to say what's more important, lens or a body, I'm gonna say the glass you shoot is more important. But don't get overwhelmed when you see people with these giant tele lenses. You don't need that. If you were to say to me, I can only afford 2 lenses, I'd be like, great. Realistically, you're going to shoot with a 35 and an 85, and you could shoot a whole wedding on 2 lenses. 35, 1.4, 85, 1.4 or 1.8 if you can't afford that one. Those lenses you could shoot an entire wedding on. They are incredibly versatile, so don't get overwhelmed. Keep it simple and know the gear that you are using. Know your settings, whether you're shooting in manual or aperture priority. Just know your gear inside out. Shooting RAW is absolutely fundamental as a wedding photographer anyway, but for weddings, it is so important because if you do make a mistake with your settings, you could save it in post-production with a RAW file. Really, really important. If you're new to wedding photography and you're like, what's a RAW file? A RAW file is the file in its rawest format. It's completely there. And you can change it, manipulate it, add presets, and completely transform that image in Lightroom. If you're shooting in JPEG, that's a half-baked file, so you haven't got much room to change it, so make sure you're shooting RAW. That is the first thing you should check with your camera on a wedding day. The next tip is make sure you are shooting to dual card slots. I cannot stress how important it is to have 2 memory cards in both bodies. So you are recording to slot 1 and slot 2. Record both to RAW, so that way if one card corrupts, you have the second memory card. You want to cover every single possible scenario, and these things do happen. It doesn't matter how experienced you are, you just never know when you might get a corrupt card, a corrupt slot. You can't risk that. And with people's memories, it's not an option to be like, oh yeah, sorry, I've got no memory cards. It's not an option. So make sure you are prepared. Making sure you have plenty of batteries. So having your batteries charged, having as many as you can possibly afford is really important. If you are a little trigger happy, you are going to burn for your battery. If it's a hot day, the battery's going to go down. There are so many factors into battery life, and making sure you carry your batteries and your memory cards physically on you, because if you are in the middle of a ceremony or a wedding, your battery dies, you can't run back to your bag. So make sure you're physically carrying it on you on a little fanny pack or a bum bag, making sure you carry it on you. Making sure you have a flash. Now, you don't need to spend tons and tons on a flash gun. In the very, very beginning, I paid for what I could afford. There are so many options online in used camera shops. There's Godox, there's Pro Photo. Godox is amazing, really, really affordable, and it does the job. When you get more experience, for me personally, I use Pro Photo, but in the very beginning, Godox is a brilliant option. Have a practice with flash before your wedding, turn the lights off, turn some disco lights on. If you have that luxury, have a practice and watch as many videos on YouTube as possible. That's the beauty of YouTube. There is a video for everything, so there is no excuse. So watch videos on how to use flash and keep it really, really simple. Don't be doing drag shutter and lots of creative stuff in your first wedding. Keep it simple, keep them in focus, keep them lit, is what I say in the very beginning. Another tip as well for being prepared is knowing the timeline. So ahead of the wedding, you're gonna send a template to your couple on what their wedding timeline is. So what time is hair and makeup starting? What time is the ceremony? When they're leaving for the ceremony? When confetti is? When the drinks reception is, group shots. All these timings are absolutely vital as a wedding photographer. The top tip I do is I actually screenshot it and then save it as the wallpaper on my phone. So that way I can just glance at it on the wedding day. And that really, really helps to just refer to, so okay, I have 45 minutes for this, ceremonies at this time, and that way you just know. Because very often on a wedding day, people look to you as the wedding photographer, like, what happens now? What am I doing? What am I doing? And if you say, yes, the ceremony's in a couple of minutes time, so you want to get into your dress now. This will really, really help with your confidence, because as it is, shooting your first wedding is really, really nerve-wracking. Throw in a timeline, that adds another layer of stress. And when things run behind, you have even less time to get those shots. But if you know the timings, you can be really calm and confident and say, yep, so the ceremony is about half an hour's time, so now you want to get into your dress. Or, okay, so you're having your dinner in about an hour's time, so what we'll do your group shots in a couple of minutes, just being really calm and in control. Really, really important to not let the day run away with you and let everybody else, because everyone has an opinion, like, oh, this would make a really nice photo, where's the photographer, oh, this is really, really, take control. You know what you need to get, so knowing the timeline like the back of your hand is really, really important, so don't underestimate that. The group shots. Now, admittedly, years and years ago, my first wedding, I had no idea about group shots. I would just be like, okay, well, I know I need to take them. So I was like, cool, so who do you want in your group shots? And then you just stand there and it's just like a free-for-all and it's chaos and it's crazy. And group shots are the bane of any wedding photographer's life. But they don't need to be if you are prepared. And now 7, 8 years into my career, I can do group shots with my eyes closed, and I try and make it as stress-free and as seamless as possible. And that comes with preparation. The key to great group shots is preparation and prepping your couple and actually educating them realistically how long they're going to take and keeping it to as few as possible. And I will say in the past, I have done like 20, 30 group shots, and that's just not necessary. It isn't necessary. Group shots are incredibly important. I have had couples say to me, we don't want them. They are going to want them. Because these photos might not mean anything now, but long term, they will mean the most, because those people won't always be around. You can't necessarily get all those people together on one day. So group shots are important. So what I do beforehand is, with the timeline questionnaire I send to my couple, I ask them to list their group shots. I personally give a limit of 9 family photos. I always say to people, what are you going to print? What's going to be in your album? Who are your ride or dies? I need 9 group shots, and then I count bridesmaids, groomsmen as separate. I feel like that's a whole different situation. So keep it simple. Don't overpromise, because these things take time. So what I do is I say, can you actually list the names of your family members? So don't say like bride's mum, groom's dad. You want Linda, Susie, Jake, Corey. Get them to actually list the names, because you're going to call these out on the day. And it's a lot quicker. So you can say, okay, the next photo is bridegroom, Linda, James, Clive, Susie. It flows a lot better. And then I also ask for 2 designated helpers. I need a designated helper from each partner. Really, really important, because you don't know who these people are. I don't know who Linda is. That could be anybody, but they will realistically know who these people are. It tends to be a family member, sibling, someone who's quite loud, someone who's not shy and not going to wander off at the bar. So I say to my couple ahead of time, so pick a designated helper from each side, make sure they stay there, they don't wander off, not at the bar, doing shots. They're there for your group shots. And this basically means we can get your group shots done really, really quickly, so you can enjoy your wedding sooner. And couples are like, yeah, that sounds great. That sounds great. So pick your location for group shots and pick somewhere with consistent light, a consistent background. Don't overcomplicate it. I would always prioritize good light, then background. Really important, because I think early on in my career, I was like, oh, that's really, really pretty. And then the background was blown out and the light kept changing, and then editing was a nightmare. But this comes with experience. So look for somewhere with consistent light that is diffused, that isn't dappled, that isn't harsh, that is flattering for everybody, is what I'd say. And make sure your aperture is above 3.4. Don't open, don't go at 1.4, because you want as many people in focus as possible. So pay attention to your settings. Make sure that aperture is cranked up to get all that detail in. I tend to shoot landscape, portrait, and a cropped, but overshoot because people's eyes will be closed, and you've got to get this right. So make sure you overshoot this section. Next tip, sounds like a simple one, Wear a watch, really important. Wearing a watch is absolutely vital as a wedding photographer because you need to pay attention to the time, and when you are shooting, it just flies by, and you need to know those kind of key checkpoints: ceremony, confetti, couple shots, group shots, first dance. These are all really, really vital, so having an awareness of the time is absolutely key. Couple portraits, so this will naturally be a part of the day where you can kind of relax, but also not relax because it's really important. But I know for lots of people, this tends to be our most favorite part of the day, naturally, as a wedding photographer. But it's also high stakes because it is the shot. These are the photos they are going to frame and print and share. So I always say to people, give yourself plenty of time for this and be prepared for if it rains, if the light isn't great, if the weather isn't great. Have a rainy day contingency if you are in a country where the weather isn't great. So I would arrive at the ceremony way before I start and actually location scout the venue then. So you can say, oh, okay, that looks really nice. A couple of portraits there, that would be lovely. So you have an idea. So when it comes to a couple of portraits, you're not like, nothing fills a couple with more anxiety when you don't know what you're doing. As it is your first wedding, so obviously you're going in and you don't really know. But if you have an awareness and a knowledge of the venue prior to the couple shoot, that's going to massively work in your favor. So location scouting in the morning and having a route worked out. When it comes to the couple portrait session, if it was me, I would revise in my head 5 poses. Just 5, and then from that you can elaborate and you can just take what comes naturally to you. But you are going to be nervous, it is your first time, so having 5 poses on your phone ready to go will really, really help. I have a posing guide which you can see the link below, so just save them on your phone so you can look at them and just refer to them, and the couple won't mind if you just give me 1 second, guys. I'm just going to look here at the mood board and some ideas that I had in mind for you. They're not going to think any less of you, so don't be like, oh, they're going to see them on my phone. Posing block is very, very real. And posing block does happen to the best of us. And sometimes it's nice to just have a little bit of inspiration and a little spark of idea if you are stuck. So having those on your phone will really, really help you. For me personally, the very first pose I start with is walking. Easiest thing to do. So the very first thing I do is get my couple to hold hands and walk towards me. And this is a really good icebreaker. I'm not going to be like diving straight into head-to-head, kissing forehead, because that's a bit much, and you need to build that trust and you need to get them relaxed, and everybody can walk. So I give them some space. So I'll start on my 35 and I say, okay guys, just like walk towards me, hold hands and just have a chat about your day. And they're like, oh, it's really, really simple. And I will just keep shooting. And that will get them relaxed. And typically walking shots are some of my favorite photos because they're really, really natural, they're really, really candid, and motion always creates emotion. So I always start with that. And once they're relaxed, and then I can get them stopping and holding each other, putting their arms around each other, having a cuddle, and then you can go from there. But don't be afraid to take your time at this part, like drop your voice, like change your pacing. You know, romanticize this. This is a really important part of the day, and this shouldn't be chaotic, it shouldn't be rushed. This should be something you take your time with. So just take it easy, play music, and just keep chatting to them, because what you're actually doing as well is you're creating an experience for them. So never underestimate the importance of the experience with you, because people won't remember the tiny details, but they will remember how they felt. So that's really, really important that you try and create a magical atmosphere for them at the same time. Research. So doing research before a wedding, I think is a really, really good idea. Now with the internet and Instagram and TikTok and wedding blogs, there is just so many images everywhere. You can see a full gallery online. So if it was me now, before a wedding, I would look on wedding blogs. I would look at some galleries and just see what are the type of photos people are taking. I think I very much freestyled my first wedding. I think I should have gone in with probably more of an idea, but if I was saying to somebody now, I would say research, read wedding blogs, look at wedding magazines, and kind of get familiar with the flow of a wedding day. What are the typical photos taken? And you can take bits from each, but I'm not saying replicate and copy, but get inspired and have an understanding and a knowledge about what typical wedding photos look like, what happens, what to look out for. For me personally, I think I felt confident going into my first wedding because I've attended weddings. So I was like, oh yeah, this happens. My wedding photos were like this. That's kind of what happens. But if you're completely new to weddings, I would say that would really, really help you. So you know, oh, okay, you know, the groom's getting his jacket on. He might be like fixing his cufflinks, doing his bow tie. Oh, the bride's getting her veil on. You know, you stand by the window holding a bouquet. There's shots of the shoes, there's kind of shots of the details, the invitations, people entering the room, coming up the aisle. It will really, really help, I think, with your confidence because you will just be looking for these things. So just, I would say, research and have an idea beforehand will really, really help you. The ceremony. Okay, this is gonna be the scariest part of the wedding day photographically because you don't get a do-over. It happens once and there's a lot of pressure because it happens once. So try and be prepared as possible for this. So a really good way to prepare for the ceremony is asking your couple on the call what kind of ceremony they're having, how many readings they're having, how they're entering. Are they entering in together? Are they entering with their parents? Like everybody has a different ceremony setup. So knowing it ahead of time will massively help you. With ceremonies as well, it's important to note that lighting is such a Russian roulette. You might be blessed with amazingly window lit ceremony. So your bride walks in and she's lit by the window and it's perfect. But realistically, sometimes it's backlit, sometimes it's really dark, sometimes you're in a room with loads of dodgy lighting. So I tend to ask my couple, okay, which room are you getting married in? So you can look online beforehand what the setup is. Okay, and where will your celebrant or officiant be, or your registrar or your priest? Where are they going to be standing? And you just work around them. Typically, I always stand at the top where the bride or groom, the partner is waiting. I tend to stay that way so I can capture the walking down the aisle. As photographers, we're always like, oh, like I want to be discreet, like they just don't think I'm wandering around. People really don't care. I think that is something I have learned over the years. I think I used to be like, oh, I want to be discreet as possible. Like there's a lot going on anyway. If they've got videographers, there's a videographer and there's a tripod, like there's musicians, like don't worry about it too much. But walking around with confidence and anticipating moments will make you seem less awkward, if that makes sense. So staying at the top, capturing the arrival of the bride or the groom coming in and just staying there. And I would shoot that on as wide as possible, so 35, 24, so you can capture all the kind of detail, the reactions of the guests. And then switching and capturing their reaction of them walking in. And then I would tend to move kind of towards the back so I can capture that partner's reaction and that partner's reaction, depending on if they're doing vows. So if one partner's reading the vows, I will stand this side and capture them reading it, and then I will move to the other side and capture their reaction to that person's reading it. So what I will say is capture as many options as possible, mix up your lenses, and just keep your camera up the whole time. So a rule I have with weddings is I try not let my camera just hang around here because you will miss a shot. So even if your arms are achy, the trick is you want to keep your camera here and just be ready just the whole time, because there's nothing worse on a wedding day when you see something happen with your eyes and your camera and your eyes didn't, and you just missed it. That's the worst. So if in doubt, overshoot your first wedding. That's another tip as well, overshoot, because if you've overshot it, the odds are you've got it and it's in there, rather than, oh, I didn't get that, I didn't get a picture of Linda, I didn't get a picture of that. Overshoot, because the worst thing you can do with overshooting is you just reject it and it doesn't make the cut. So it's better to have it and have too much of it than not have it. I digress. Ceremony. So yes, you want to stay at the back, capture both the reactions, move. When it comes to readings, I tend to step into the aisle and move and capture the person's reading. If you have the luxury of having a second shooter, they can capture it. But if it's your first wedding, you might not have a second shooter. So just move around and don't be paranoid or nervous to move around. So once they've done the readings, the exchanging of the rings, the first kiss, be ready for the first kiss, because when it happens, it tends to happen really, really quickly. So I tend to photograph the first kiss standing that way, so all the family's behind, because that's quite a nice moment to get everybody applauding and like, woo. So I tend to capture it that way. Once the first kiss is done, I tend to move into the aisle to the back of the ceremony. If they're signing a register, you can kind of photograph that, just be discreet. Different counties have different rules. Some say you can't photograph the register, other places they don't really care. It varies, so just be mindful and respectful, because everywhere's different. If it's a church, that's a whole other situation. Everywhere is different, but speaking to who's leading the ceremony ahead of time when you arrive early and just say, oh, do you have any requirements? Just let me know and I'll just work around you. So I'm just very mindful and respectful of that. So you photograph that, stay at the back, because they would typically come up the processional and be together, and they might be like, woo, kiss, and then you just walk backwards and capture that. So be ready for that. Walking backwards, that's now part of your job, like remit, like no one tells you these things, but walking backwards, if anything, I'd say, you know what, get on a treadmill with a camera and walk backwards. Like that's probably the most helpful skill. As a wedding photographer and videographer, you're gonna be walking backwards a lot. Why is that? Like no one tells you these things.
Most of the day.
Yeah, most of the day you're just walking backwards. So yeah, that's another tip. Just practice walking backwards with your camera, and just be like really self-aware what's behind you. So you walk backwards. So those are my tips for the ceremony. If in doubt, overshoot it, but pay attention as well to the guests' reactions. So have that 85, just look at the family members. Are they crying? Are they like sobbing? Do they have a tissue? Are they holding hands? Pay attention to all the little emotions that make up the gallery, which is so important. So just keep your eyes open in the ceremony, because that is where a lot of emotion is. So many emotions happen in a ceremony, and very often there'll be people that surprise you. Like very often couples say, oh, like my dad's not emotional at all. Like you're not gonna get anything out of him. And then he's like bawling. So just pay attention and just people spot, and just never have your camera down. Just have it up and just look around and just stalk people and just keep an eye out for those emotions. Another tip for your very first wedding is pay attention to the guests. Guests are really, really important. They make the wedding. So photographing guests is incredibly important. And that's the thing, as a wedding photographer, you've got to be everywhere all at once. So you honestly won't stop shooting. That is when you know you've done your job. You should be knackered. Your arms should be aching. You should be clocking up like 15,000, 20,000 steps. That is what it's realistically like on a wedding day. You shouldn't be chilling, eating canapes, like sat on your phone. Nah, you don't sit down until the couple sits down for their first meal. You need to be walking around and capturing guests. So watching them, chatting to each other, laughing, and just people spotting, and just wait for those moments to happen. Anticipate them happening before they're happening. And over time, you will get better at that. But on your first wedding, just watch those guests, and don't be afraid to also ask people to pose. So very often I'll see a couple or a family and say, oh, do you mind just like stopping and having a little photo together? And they're like, yeah, they love that, because I personally like to have a mixture of candid and posed imagery of guests. And very often with guests, when they actually stop and look to the camera, they end up buying it because they frame it, because it's a really nice photo of them all looking to camera. I photograph all the couples, families, and they're very appreciative, and the couple love to see that in their gallery. My next tip is prioritize great light over a great location. This is something I've learned many years later. Look for the good light. Light is your best friend, and I think as wedding photographers, I think we get really caught up in the pretty part of the wedding, like, oh, that's really pretty, like we should photograph that. But if the light isn't great, it's not going to be a pretty photo. So look for that beautiful light, that the shade, the diffused light, the golden hour. Look at light constantly and stick to your guns, because everybody at the wedding will have an opinion on what photo you should take. It happens a lot, especially when you're in group shots. People will say, oh, like, don't you want to shoot us in the sun? No, I don't want to shoot you in the sun. So stick to your guns and know your lighting. And this comes with time and experience, and make sure you are assertive. So if there's somewhere you rather photograph your couple, take them and say, this light is absolutely stunning, just stand here for me. Group shots we're gonna do here. Have confidence, be assertive, and choose the good light. Really, really important. Another top tip is keep moving, don't stay in one place. For me, I'm constantly on my feet, I'm constantly moving to various locations because there might be things happening in this part of the wedding and this part. Try and move around as much as possible, and that way you have way more perspectives on a wedding day. The gallery is varied and you cover a lot more ground with guests, with locations, with storytelling. Move as much as possible and just keep your eyes open is what I would say. And your first wedding, you're gonna learn a lot, you're gonna make mistakes, but the trick is, if you've shot it, you've got it, and you just never know with weddings. Stuff happens when you least expect it. It might be a moment with two relatives who have not seen each other in years, but just anticipating those moments, sticking around and being patient and waiting for it to happen, and just having your camera ready to capture it. Another top tip for the wedding, and this is something that's in my core values as a photographer, and that is making sure you stay as positive as possible. This is really, really important, and something that shouldn't be underestimated as a photographer. Whatever you put out, you get back. And with wedding days, they are stressful, they are high energy, they are unpredictable, wild things that happen with lots of chaos because they're real human days. And as soon as, if you are negative, if you are stressed, anxious, that breeds into everybody else. And never underestimate that as a photographer, the power you have on your couple, the wedding party, the family. So stay positive, stay calm. There is always a solution to everything on a wedding day. You know, stuff breaks, the zip might go, like the timer might be off, the cake might have fallen over, the wrong flowers are there, that person doesn't like that person, they're arguing, there's a fight breaking out. These have all been things that happen at weddings I've been to. Like, seriously, things happen at wedding days, but you've got to remember, why are you there? You are there to capture the story of the couple's day. Messy, real and all. But also for me personally, I want my couple to have the best day possible. I want to make their experience really, really fun, magical, because that's what it's all about. If you're not having fun on a wedding day, what are you doing? And as much as we see these glorious photos on Instagram, magazines, Pinterest, we've got to remember what the day is about. It's about two people committing to each other. They've chosen this venue, these flowers, that suit, that dress, this location, this date, all for a reason. And you want to make it as magical for them as possible. And if it means helping them, being positive, making sure they are enjoying it, because so many emotions are heightened on a wedding day, and staying positive and enthusiastic and just being in control and making it easy as possible for the couple will really, really help them. And this is something I get commented on all the time. People are like, oh, that really, really helped me. Like, I don't know what we would have done without you. Be an asset to your couple, and this is how you will build value long-term in your business. And this is something that you shouldn't underestimate. And being an additional pair of hands, helping them, making sure they have a drink, making sure they have their canapes, making sure they have a rest, that they sit down, that they are enjoying the day, that it isn't just about the photos, that they are having a good time. So spotting these things and just looking out for them like you would like a friend. So being positive, enthusiastic is really, really important. So don't underestimate that. Even though below the surface you might be like, oh my gosh, this is so stressful, like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I messed that shot up. Like, don't get in your head, don't let it eat away at you, because you got to move on. It's so fast paced, and before you know it, something else is happening. So just keep it cool, keep it chill, keep the vibes good. The vibes are really important. The vibes are good. I want that in massive text. Bring the vibe, be the wedding, go to the wedding, be the wedding, and just bring the vibes. Top tip. Next top tip is stay hydrated as much as possible but not too much on a wedding day, because you don't want to drink too much that you're going to disappear into the toilet, because typically on a wedding day, I personally don't go to the toilet until everybody's sat down because I don't want to miss a moment. So hydration tablets are a really good way around this to keep you hydrated, because your body will run on adrenaline and you won't really eat until later in the day. You don't eat lunch, you don't want to eat too much. So candy is a really good way to kind of keep those sugar levels up. But make sure you do drink enough so you stay hydrated, because the next day in the wedding world we call the wedding hangover, and that is when you are dehydrated from the day before and you're exhausted, and it's a massive come down and it's horrible, and you will experience it, and it's very, very real. And for me personally, I get adrenal fatigue, I get massive exhaustion after a wedding. So make sure you stay hydrated, have little snacks, and just pay attention to your hydration levels so you don't crash and you don't faint. I've also seen that happen, so make sure you take care of yourself. And my last tip is marketing. So marketing, networking, and having an awareness as you as a brand and business. You've shot that wedding, you have those images. What you want to do is network with as many possible suppliers from that wedding. The florist, the dressmaker, the hair and makeup artist, the venue, getting as many tags as possible and handles from those suppliers. So asking them, oh, what's your handle on Instagram? I'll tag you in these pictures afterwards. And when you deliver those previews, you want to tag all those suppliers, put them in the captions, because what they're going to do is they're going to see those images, they're going to love them, and then they're going to reshare them. And that is how you are going to grow from that very first wedding. The idea is you want to get those images in front of as many eyes as possible. That is the goal, because you shot this amazing wedding. What are you going to do with those images? You want to get them in front of as many people as possible, and that is how you book your next wedding and the next wedding. So share those images with people. Don't be too precious. Don't think, oh, like, I don't want to share them. Send those images to the venue, and then what you're going to want to do is blog it. So put it on your website. Think about the SEO, target that venue, target that location, and make sure that those images have way more longevity. So they don't just go on Instagram, they go on your website, they go on your blog, they go on Pinterest, they go on Instagram, they go on TikTok. Spread those images as much as possible. And that is how you're going to book your next wedding, the one after that, the one after that, and then referrals. At weddings, you never know, those guests that you talk to could be your future clients. So be polite, be kind. If someone says, oh, can you just get a picture of me? We haven't seen. Yes, you never say no to a photo request. So be open, be kind, be polite. You never know who the people are around you. Really, really important. I can't underestimate that. That's something I've massively learned over the years. For me, my mentality is always abundance. Like, what can I do for other people? Because it always comes back around. Don't be an island. Don't get precious about your photos. Don't be like, oh, I'm going to charge. No, just share your images. Don't be silly. And think about getting it blogged on other wedding blogs, other wedding magazines, so then even more people can see your photos. I hope you have enjoyed this video. I hope it's been helpful. Enjoy your first wedding. It is so magical. It's so stressful. It's great. But it's incredible, and it's the beginning of the most incredible career. I'm so excited for you. Please comment down below how it went. Send me your Instagram. I want to see those images, and make sure you kind of take a moment and also reflect on what you've learned, because I was always told you should leave every single wedding with 1 or 2 massive learns. There's always something you can improve on with your wedding, your photography, whether it's composition, lighting, style, choices. There's always something you can improve on, and make sure you walk away with that. Don't be too hard on yourself. You are new. It is your first wedding, and just think where you'll be in a year's time, 2 years time. I'm really excited for you. Make sure you like and subscribe for more videos, and I hope to see you soon. Bye.